Hey, what's going on, everybody? Max here with BB, and today for 10 Minutes Max, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin, crypto, and answering the ever so important question, can prices remain bullish as we head into 2026? We are now about halfway through Q4. It's been kind of rocky so far, but as a wise man once said, they had us in the first half, but Bitcoin and crypto always have a way of coming back from the most horrific looking technical setups. And we're going to talk about precisely what is going on today. And I'm going to share what I am looking for in order to salvage this quarter and really slingshot us into a bullish Q1. Do me a solid, guys. Let's get this out of the way early. Show some love, show some support, hit that like button, and also subscribe to the channel if you are new. So I'm gonna go over a few different things because the market is at a really awkward fork in the road, right? I don't think I can remember a time when I've seen the traders in which I respect the most so split and divided on what's going to happen here. And we're going to just dissect all the possibilities here and see if we can, as a group, as a collective, find some clarity. So here's the kind of more popular bear case that I'm seeing right now. After Trump wins the election, we pump. And we basically built this range, okay? And the range was like right here, okay? And then after that, we spent a couple months dinking around up in here. And we've since broken down, right? So the big concern from a technical standpoint that I'm seeing, and for good reason, is that if this is our range, and again, this happened in, the very tail end of Q4 last year. This is like a year ago, okay? And all of this is a deviation or basically a bull trap, meaning like we tried to break out here and we basically just like destroyed everybody, broke it back down into the range. And I'm seeing a lot of people just saying, well, if this is just a range, well, then ranges love symmetry. We could be targeting down here eventually, and it's the start of a bear market. And in my last video, I went over in detail the timing of the cycle and how, this timing, if the top were to be in, would be really similar to previous cycles. And I hope you caught my last video because it was like 45 minutes. So I'm not going to go over all of it again. But cyclically, from a timing perspective, that would maybe be a concern, right? To say, oh, this was like a deviation, bull trap. We're back inside the range. We're going to drop into here and then print some shoulder, and then that's the beginning of the bear market, right? That's what they're concerned about, right? I'm kind of in a neutral position right now where like I see some things that I like and I see some things that I don't like, but I'm just kind of waiting for a resolution, right? I'm just kind of waiting. I don't really feel I'm holding all my spot crypto, to be fair. So I guess if you base it off my portfolio weighting, I'm super long, I'm super bullish, but it is an awkward spot to be fair. Like I very much so see the technical concern here that like if this is a giant range, then we're back in it. And then you throw into the mix something like this, right? And we'll take this trend right here. And you can say to yourself, well, yeah, horizontals are more important than diagonals because there's some subjectivity to it. Like, do I want to do the diagonal across here? This is in log mode. If I put it in linear mode, then the trend line goes down here, right? Or even we could, again, kind of cheat a little bit as, diagonals allow you to do and say, oh, we look at the perfect bounce off of it, right? So understand that, if you see this trend line, there are so many different ways to view this, high time frame log or linear trend line. When you have it in log like this, it looks like a breakdown, right? And this is a bearish retest. If I look at it in linear mode, oh, well, look how bullish this is. We're bouncing off of the most obvious support, right? I think maybe kind of acknowledge both, and it just kind of further corroborates my point in that it's a really awkward spot where we're kind of like, under the range high in a way. So like this is your kind of range high. So you're kind of under support. You're kind of tucking under resistance. This log line might be bearish depending on how you draw it. It's awkward, right? Like there's a few different ways to interpret it. Okay. Now, something else that I do have some concerns about, and I promise this is not just some giant bear case. We're just kind of hammering out some of the discussion points I see people talking about. And then I'll share what I'm thinking as we kind of get into the end of it, right? But it's an awkward spot, as you can see. You know, one thing that I think is throwing a lot of people off is the wick that happened on October 10th, okay? And myself included. Wicks matter, but what matters more is a closing basis, all right? So I think a lot of people right now that are bullish locally are viewing this as your range, right? They're saying, okay, clearly range low, range high, deviation of the range high, deviation of the range low. We're back inside the range, send it, right? That's what they're saying. Now, I hope that they're right, you know, and really anything can happen, but I wanted to talk about how this is, in my opinion, this is not your range low at all. Okay. This was a wick. We were barely down here. When you switch over to a line chart, you can actually see the closing basis. A line chart does not include wicks. You can modify it so that it does, but the one I'm going to show you is simply off of closing basis. So let's put it into a line chart. And actually, we'll even go to like the 6 hour. Okay, so we get a little bit more data. Okay, here's how they're viewing the range. When you put it in a line chart, this is how it looks. So let's just do this. We'll erase the range because all we care about is like the range low for right now. Are we floating? So this is, and we'll label this candlestick range low. And then we'll put it in a line chart. And when you put it in a line chart, you can see very clearly that your range low is really more somewhere around here. Okay, so this is line chart range low. And I'll make the text a little bit bigger so you guys can read it. So I think that the wick that happened over here is, in a way, right now, I think it's kind of faking people out. I think it's giving people a false sense of local strength here to say that this is a range low. Wicks matter because they always seem to cause reactions, sweeps, liquidation events. They do matter, but they don't matter as much as a multi-month range low based on a closing basis. So again, let's toggle this back off. Your range low feels much more like right up at here, maybe 107, 108, right? So if we just go off of the closing basis, this is very possibly, right? And we could even extend it back to here. Like this is kind of your whole range low, okay? If we go off of a closing basis, which I would argue is more important than a wick, you are technically floating under your range low. And if you're buying down here, you are betting more or less on a, PO3 pattern, which is, range. This is technically the deviation on a closing basis, which I think there's very much so validity to acknowledging that like your range was lost. Doesn't mean it can't be reclaimed. And if we do reclaim the line chart range low, 108, then we can start talking about, the expansion phase, which the technical target would probably be more just like take out the highs. But I would, I'd say if you can reclaim that, you probably have, quite a bit of runway in my opinion. So again, this is really more just to highlight like how charts, especially when they're in such like an awkward holding pattern right now, can play a little bit of a trick on you, right? It can play a little bit of a trick on you where you could be looking at the wick being like, yeah, deviation, reclaim, send it. And it's possible you're right. We could even see something like this. And it's a very real setup. Like that could be happening. But the level you really need to look out for is actually above head, not something we've already reclaimed. However, there are also other pairs that are painting a different, more bullish picture, okay? So Bitcoin USDT or Bitcoin USD it's the most popular pair. It's the one that most people use, right? Denominated against the dollar, world reserve currency, okay? But there's also another pair that carries a significant amount of weight in these markets and has for quite some time. And it's Bitcoin JPY, okay? Bitcoin paired against the Japanese yen and not the dollar, okay? So when I look at Bitcoin JPY, it paints a different, actually, let me do this. Let me go back to, because I want to show you some of the high time frame differences, why it's not simply enough to just look at the USD pair anymore. Here, we'll go over here. Hopefully my drawings will sync. All right, Bitcoin, JPY. Perfect. Let's remove this. All right. So over here on the left, we have Bitcoin USD. And over here, we have Bitcoin JPY. Now, I want to show you how significant this Bitcoin JPY pair is actually, okay? Because it, believe it or not, it trades a lot cleaner than the Bitcoin USD chart. Let me give you a prime example. So Bitcoin USD over here. When Bitcoin pulled back over here and put in a bottom April 8th, right? You can see we kind of front ran that high, right? So we didn't quite get the perfect retest. But then if we go over here and we look at Bitcoin JPY, here, let me go to the 2-day time frame on both, just so we're not so squished. You can see that Bitcoin JPY from that same base actually gave you a perfect retest, okay? And furthermore, when we sold off over here, Bitcoin JPY was screaming distribution, while Bitcoin USD was not, okay? Prime example of that is this is distributive. When you take out a high like this, tuck back under reject, distribution. Bitcoin USD did not take out these highs and just kind of kept sliding. But if you were watching the Bitcoin Japanese yen pair, you would have seen very clearly, oh, this is actually a much more bearish setup than what the USD pair is telling me. So not only is there kind of like a little, like a secret tell, but the JPY pair for Bitcoin actually trades cleaner. So again, look at the, was not a perfect retest. And over here, we actually had a perfect retest, right? So it trades very, very cleanly, okay? So it is, it's Bitcoin, but it's denominated in another currency, right? So hopefully you can see the value in that, right? It's pretty interesting. And then furthermore, we can go over here and you can just see how clean, this retest was over here, retesting that high. Bitcoin over here on the USD pair actually front ran the perfect retest again. It got really, really close, right? But it didn't give you the perfect retest, where Bitcoin JPY actually did give you that perfect retest. So there are a few high time frame instances of, dare I say, perfection on the JPY pair. Okay. Now the reason I bring this up is to go over the same example over here. All right. So let's pull up this chart again. Here's Bitcoin USD. Let me find my label, drag it over here. Because the Bitcoin JPY pair is actually telling you something different than the Bitcoin USD pair. So let's dive in. I was just explaining how I think that the wick is actually giving people a false sense of confidence on the Bitcoin USD pair. But if you look at Bitcoin JPY, let's draw out the same wick. So that low is right here, right? Or actually, it'd be right here, right? But you can see how, they look different. Now, if we put this on a line chart, you can see the candlestick range low has already been reclaimed over here, right? Like your candlestick range low has already been reclaimed. And furthermore, your line chart range low is actually, dare I say, below where your wick range low is. See that? So the Bitcoin JPY pair has, without question, reclaimed both the October 10th nuke wick and also the local range wick. So let's put them both in line charts. I'm on the 12-hour time frame on both. Do you see how different these pairs look? Let me even I can just I'll just draw one line for both, okay? So this is your Bitcoin USD range low right here. And this is your Bitcoin JPY pair right here. They're both on the 12-hour time frame. Do you see how the Bitcoin JPY pair actually looks like a very bullish range low reclaim, while Bitcoin USD looks like a bearish retest? This is important. And it's primarily important because all cycles so far, Bitcoin JPY has actually traded cleaner in terms of reclaims and retesting previous levels and holding them, while Bitcoin USD has kind of front ran previous levels or painted different pictures at different times. So that's kind of a bullish leaning case, just sort of a contrarian case where you can look at Bitcoin USD and say, yeah, this is bearish, but I can look at Bitcoin JPY and say that's actually really bullish. Like, we're charting Bitcoin, but different currency pairs, and they're telling different stories. So I think both are important. I think you need to see Bitcoin USD eventually reclaim that 108 level, but Bitcoin JPY is telling you that we might be ready to go already, right? We might be ready to go already. Now we're going to move over here. Going to give an update on the Volume Fusion Pro. We went over this in the last video. This was giving me, again, just some more signs of like local caution. Now, this is a high time frame system. For those that didn't catch the last video, I'll show you the back test on this. I've got a cycle long back test on Bitcoin. Goes back to the beginning of the bull market, late 2022. Here are the stats on it, okay? So this system is up 500%, and Bitcoin is up, 350%. I'm kind of rounding. Our max equity drawdown is 10.66%. Taken 122 trades. It's a long short system, and it wins just over half of them with a profit factor of 236. Okay. So a way to think about this is like if there was some guy on X, I think in my last video, I called him Bitcoin Trader 777. If Bitcoin Trader 777 on X said, hey, look at how well I've been trading Bitcoin for the past 3 years. I've been outperforming Bitcoin to the upside, and I've reduced my downside volatility to only have to deal with 10% drawdowns, and Bitcoin's had multiple, 30% plus drawdowns. You'd probably look at that Twitter account and be like, yeah, I'm going to pay attention to what that guy has to say. That's how I treat this system. It trades incredibly consistently. It's very reliable. It's a high time frame system, long short, reduces downside volatility while still maintaining and actually outpacing Bitcoin to the upside. So let's talk about what this system's actually showing right now. In the last video we were talking about, I said to you guys, Bitcoin is going to remain in a risk-off position. That doesn't mean that we need to nuke, but it will remain in a risk-off position until it gets back up into this orange cloud. When it gets back up into this orange cloud, the candles will start to print yellow, just like up in here, which is a neutral position, meaning we're no longer bearish, but we're not quite bullish yet on the higher time frame, okay? So in the last video I made, which was last Monday, okay? So that was right here, basically, okay? That was like right here. This was capitulating, okay? Bitcoin was waterfalling, system was fully risk off, okay? Now, I have a profit-taking mechanism built into this system, so it's actually not short right now. It's actually not in a position. But before it will start looking for longs, it needs to get back up into this orange cloud, and ideally back above the zero line to be like super, super bullish. But for right now, let's just focus on the orange cloud, because what we want is this red cloud that is suppressing us. We want that removed, okay? We want to enter a neutral state because we're not going to skip from bearish to bullish. You go bearish to neutral to bullish and vice versa. So something really interesting is happening here. And what we're seeing right now is our volume fusion line, this candle pattern up here, is actually recovering aggressively. Price has moved up a little bit, right? But we are almost back into a neutral position right now. So the system is not in a position right now, but it is looking for shorts. It's not in a short right now, but it's still in the mode of looking for shorts because we are below that orange line. So we are actually getting really close to it being neutral. Like, this is maybe 1 or 2 days away if we kind of keep this pace up here. But what's so interesting about this is we actually saw what it does is it's measuring buying and selling on exchanges in real time. What we actually saw here is kind of a little like hidden tell where we saw the volume fusion start to move up aggressively right here, stop its capitulation and start moving higher. And Bitcoin USD at that time, this was middle of last week, this is Wednesday, Thursday, we weren't moving up yet, right? But there was some shuffling going on behind the scenes here. There was active positioning and absorption going on, and that's what the system is telling us. So I can see a case here where we are really getting close to finally leaving the kind of defensive short hunting zone on this system that, again, has outpaced Bitcoin to the upside while reducing downside volatility. There's something going on here behind the scenes in terms of buying and selling on exchanges that is showing early signs of a bottom being very, very close. Okay. So we're not quite there yet. I'm not going to prematurely call it. I'm just going to trust and rely on the system that, again, if you look at the backtesting results, I don't need to be early to call, a flip. I'll just let you know when it does flip. When the system flips back to neutral and then hopefully from neutral goes to risk on, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to stay on the right side of the market. Here are the results, okay? So the point in me showing you this is I know the system well. I built the system. I watch the system every single day. There is an attempt at a bullish turnaround right here, but we're not quite there yet, but we're getting close, okay? Now, going back over here, another very bullish case, I would say, and I mentioned this in my last video, as we're going to head into, the second half of Q4 and also then, Q1, because it's like everybody kind of thought we were going to blow off in Q4. Now the big question is like, are we going to have a bullish Q1 and can 2026 still be bullish? Because like, I need a recovery here, like what's going on with this cycle? We talked about this in my last video. And I would say that the lack of an alt season actually paints a pretty bullish case. Some people will interpret it as bearish and they'll say like, we haven't had an alt season because something is inherently wrong with crypto, and there's altcoin dilution, and there's all this stuff going on. And these are all like somewhat valid points, right? Like it's not like those are not real. Those are not true, because a lot of it is true. But beta rotations are not something that's exclusive to crypto, right? As long as markets have existed, as long as cycles have existed, business cycles, economic cycles, there's always been this idea, this concept, proof of capital flowing from safer assets down the risk curve. And again, that's not something that's exclusive to crypto. It's just something that because we have cycles, we experience the same phenomenon. So this chart down here is others dominance. It's a percentage chart, okay? When this chart moves up, alts are gaining market share against Bitcoin. When this chart moves down, better to hold Bitcoin than altcoins, okay? So basically, as I went over in my last video, we have been in an others dominance or altcoin bear market literally since January of 2022, okay? It has been 1,400 days of a bleed. The only inkling of an alt season that we've had so far was this very, very small spurt over here, where we saw altcoins rally briefly from June of 2023 to March of 2024, okay? But when you really look at it like this, what this really was a complacency shoulder, okay? So this was your blow off top, and this was some sort of complacency shoulder, right in here, before ultimately getting to a bear market bottom. Okay. And, we even kind of retested like, all this supply from the last cycle. This was a shoulder, right? This was a bear market shoulder. And we've seen things like this in previous cycles. Like I would say that your, most comparable example would be like this was a shoulder, right? This was very much so like your bull market top for altcoins again. This is just a dominance chart. So it's like this is Bitcoin season, this is altcoin season. We kind of did the same thing right over here. Blow off top after alt season, right? And then shoulder, and then bear market bottom, and then alt season, right? So we haven't had an alt season yet, which is really bizarre, right? It's telling us one of two things. Either the pessimists and the bears and the doomers are correct, and we're not going to get an alt season, or it's telling us something different. It's telling us that this is a longer cycle than many, myself included, anticipated. We are going to get an alt season, and it just hasn't happened yet. And all of this has just been Bitcoin season. So there's a few different ways to look at it, right? But I would argue that, if we haven't had alt season yet, and we're actually much earlier in the cycle, and let's just assume that the bottom on others' dominance is in pretty soon. Let's look at the previous two cycles and see when the bottom has been in on alt season, right? It was right here. It was basically December of 2016, December of 2020. And what's so interesting now is that we basically have 3 weeks until December of this year, right? So it seems like the previous two high time frame swing lows or like bottoms before an alt season occurred in December. Maybe it happens again this time. So I would say this is actually, it would be hard to imagine not having an alt season. And I don't think that dilution matters, because within the context of what this oscillator is measuring, this others dominance oscillator down here, people will say, oh, well, dilution is killing this market. And I would say, I don't think it really, like, yes, to a degree with certain small, really small cap coins. But this others index is not measuring like, a $12 million market cap coin. Like, it's measuring still large altcoins, it's majors. It's stuff outside the top 10, but it's not measuring like, your 500K market cap pump fund token or whatever. So it shouldn't really be affected, that heavily by like dilution or anything like that. And also retail is not going to be the ones pumping like, a $5 billion altcoin, it's different flows. So anyways, I think this is painting somewhat of an interesting case for, maybe we move higher. And again, it's possible we could have a cycle where we don't see a rotation down the risk curve, and that's what this chart is the rotation down the risk curve. But when I look at something like, the NASDAQ, I mean, this thing has been up only, just absolutely sending, right? Like, look at this chart. This is our cycle right here. And, the others chart, the altcoin chart of TradFi is going to be something like the Russell 2000, right? This is US small cap companies. This is not Apple, Amazon, Nvidia, Google, Microsoft, right? So when I look at this, I say, well, this actually isn't that much different than previous cycles as well. US small caps haven't made a material new all-time high yet, where from that same high on the chart, going back to when they both peaked in, Q4 of 2021, you can see right here how the NASDAQ, your Bitcoin, your safe haven of legacy, has gone up only aggressively, while US small caps have not broken out yet. And that's kind of the same thing we've seen in crypto, where like Bitcoin is sort of our Mag 7, it's our large caps, it's our safe haven, right? It gets the first bid. So not only have, crypto guys suffered from no alt season, but legacy guys have suffered from no alt season, right? Hope you understand at this point what I mean when I say that. So again, it would be very rare to not see a rotation further down the risk curve, because we see it every cycle. Again, let's look at the last cycle. Here's Russell 2000 down below. And from that same high, we were seeing the same thing last cycle, where the NASDAQ made a new all-time high over here, And we didn't see alt season, beta season until many, many, many months and quarters later. So this idea of like we won't have an alt season, it's really not something that we've ever seen before. Like towards the end of an economic cycle or a business cycle, when large caps are taking a lot of the action and flow, at some point you always historically see a rotation down the risk curve, and we haven't seen that yet in equities, in TradFi, and we haven't seen that in crypto. Now, one thing I think is worth watching as well, I went over this trend line earlier, okay, this log trend line, and I gave the bull case for the log trend line, and I also gave the bear one, right? So here's our sort of bearish, here's our bearish Bitcoin trend line, right? But again, we could manipulate it to look bullish too. But I think it should be acknowledged, but you shouldn't put all of your weight in this, okay? Something that I think should be observed as well is the following. I've got this. I made this custom Memecoin index over here. And I want to show you something because the whole market is kind of waiting on like a resolution here. So we're going to put this one in log as well. We're on the same time frame. This chart right here is, I'll show you the equation, okay? It's Doge market cap plus SHIB market cap plus Pepe market cap plus Bonk market cap plus SPX 6900 market cap plus Floki market cap plus Toshi market cap plus MOG market cap, okay? Now, why did I do that? Well, these are kind of like your large cap memes of this cycle, and all of them have been around since 2023, okay? So I could add some of the smaller ones in there, some of my favorites, right? But they were born in 2024. So if I do that, then, we won't catch this on the chart. We'll like start somewhere over in here, and it just doesn't paint as clear of a picture. But they all kind of move the same, so it doesn't matter. But I wanted to show you this. In your large cap meme coin index, weighting again, Doge, SHIB, Pepe, Bong, SPX 69. Wow, I said the whole list already. We have a very, very similar trend line over here. We have a very, very similar trend line on our meme coin index chart. So we have the same exact trend line over here for Bitcoin as we do our meme coin chart. So I'm telling you right now, if Bitcoin can, reclaim 110 and get back above this trend line, that looks bearish right now if we draw it in log mode. And you can see meme coins reclaim this level. You are most likely going to have an incredibly bullish second half of Q4 all the way into, Q1 and maybe Q2. I will let you know. It's just too far to even think ahead right now. But the levels are so incredibly clear to me that you are seeing a large cap meme coin index, a beta season index, all your top meme coins by market cap, printing the same log trend line breakdown as Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is not far from reclaiming this level. Like if Bitcoin, gets back above 108, 109, which from here is 4%. And you see your meme coin basket here rally 15 to 20%, which for meme coins is nothing. That's like, just another day in crypto. I don't really see the bear case at that point. I think at that point, you've seen some, basically absorption and a failed breakdown attempt. And from here, I would at a minimum, start targeting new highs, right? I would view this as like a range right here with, an important reclaim. Again, this is just your meme coin index here. I would view this like a range high, range low, clear interaction with your mid range. If you can reclaim this level, about 15% away, which again, for meme coins is nothing. You've got some smaller ones in here, Mog and Toshi. And I mean, these are smaller meme coin market cap plays. Then I think you can start, having some fun and targeting, some like logarithmic 1618s for, higher prices. And we could even start getting into the, start having fun again, talking about, okay, where could we, potentially see this thing top out? Could we come up and, tag a trend line up here or something like that? Absolutely. And I think it all kind of hinges on a structural reclaim of a cycle long trend for your meme coin index, right? So kind of summarizing everything we talked about, right? Bitcoin USD looks questionable. Bitcoin JPY actually looks bullish, and for what it's worth, has traded much cleaner level to level this cycle than Bitcoin USD. We have not had an alt season. We have not had US small caps have their alt season, their beta rotation yet. So it's not like it's just crypto. Okay. Crypto that moves with legacy is still moving with legacy as expected. There's a few kind of bullish and bearish cases of like, structural reclaims that need to happen. So all in all, and the Volume Fusion Pro, right? Something is going on here where we're not quite there yet, but we're getting really, really close to being in a neutral position, which is huge given how things looked last video that I made on Monday. So I'm looking at all this together going, we very well may just salvage this, but job's not finished. Okay. So, I'm not bearish. I'm just kind of defensive and like questionable about like my outlook. But if I see the Volume Fusion Pro here flip back to bullish, and I see Bitcoin USD back above like 108, 109, and I see that meme coin index, reclaiming this trend line, which we are not far away from that. Like, we are not far at all. This is nothing. We could easily do this, okay? And furthermore, you'll probably see, this trend line play, right? You can see the very clear intersection of that, cycle long trend breakdown. This will probably play, right? If we see something like this, we're going to have a lot of fun, and you will laugh about having ever been worried. Things will recover incredibly quickly, but we're not quite there yet. So I don't see any value in me being like 100% confirm the bottom is in, because it's like there are still things that need resolving. But there are clearly things that I talked about today in this video that should be painting a picture of there's an attempt at a bullish recovery here. And that is nothing that should be overlooked at this point. So hopefully by next Monday when I make my next video, we're looking at this going, yeah, memes have reclaimed that trend. The Volume Fusion Pro is no longer bearish. Bitcoin USD is now more aligned with Bitcoin JPY. And let's run this thing back. So we're almost there. I think it's worth waiting and seeing. But, still work to be done. But guys, thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next time. Take care.